I don't know. No fist bumping in my courtroom, you hear that? I saw you and Mr.
It's a basketball.
Oh, it's a basketball thing?
We were off the record.
Mr. Donaldson, you bringing out all the big guns now, huh? My ex-prosecutor? Soften me up.
I don't think that's possible.
I'm ready. Back on the record. Appearances for the record.
Robert Donaldson, appearing on behalf of people.
And John Donaldson on behalf of people.
James Thompson, behalf of Mr. Melendez.
Friend from Mr. Melendez.
Very good. Now is the time that we have come for each side, respective side, to address the court as to what they believe should be done in this matter.
No, I don't envy your position. I don't.
Would you like to exchange positions?
Shots?
Oh, go ahead.
You're presented with a difficult decision, and I grant you that. I'm going to be the advocate that I'm paid to be and do what I'm supposed to do. When Kim Worthy asked me what I was going to recommend in this case, I said I got to treat it just like every single assaulted case I've ever had handled in the course of my career. I'm going to advocate strongly for the guidelines to reflect the behavior. I'm going to advocate for a sentence near the top of the guidelines and give the court an opportunity to exceed them and reasons why I think that the court can exceed them. And I'm staying true to form in this particular circumstance. I'm not here to put horns on Mr. Melendez. I'm not here to try his past, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm here to address what is an appropriate response to what he did to Mr. Dent, not only that day, but in the days following. On that particular day, I suggest to the court that he targeted Mr. Dent for perhaps improper reasons, but did target him. That after the beating took place, he knew that it was captured on video, and he did the best that he could to make Mr. Dent the defendant in the case and himself the complainant in the case. He did that by lying in his police report. He did that by lying in his affidavit for the search warrant for blood. And he did that under oath in front of the judge out in Inkster. I think all of that shows that he really doesn't have any remorse. I don't read his refusal to give a statement to the probation department against him. I think that if I were his lawyer, I would have told him to do the same thing. I'm speaking to his behavior and how it was he responded to the wrong that he had done. And his response was to attack his opponent, and he did so with vim and vigor. I'd indicate to the court that the focus in this particular case need not be on rehabilitation, which is a portion of the court's way of evaluating it. Should not be on whether or not he's going to go out and beat up some other folks as a police officer, because I don't think that's going to happen. I do think the court's focus should be on whether or not the sentence is likely to deter others from engaging in similar behavior. And I think that a sentence within the guidelines, at the top of the guidelines, would be appropriate to send that message. In addition, I think given the aggravated circumstances of this particular beating and what occurred to Mr. Dent both on that day and up to this day, where he's still getting attacked by defense counsel, I think are valid reasons to depart upward. I mean what I say. I think that you've got a difficult decision in front of you. The advocate that I am, I think the sentence should be reflective of the behavior of the deterrent to others, and I trust you to do the right thing.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thomas. Be equally assured.
Judge?
Be equally assured. I mean, not by
Judge,
height. I didn't mean that.
first of all, I want to thank you for paying attention to the sentencing memo that we prepared. We tried to be as detailed as we could. I have just been blamed for abusing Mr. Dent. and adding to his difficulty. The criminal defense lawyer's job is to stand up for his defendant. Mr. Melendez has asked for a trial. He's entitled to that under the Constitution. I don't believe that he should be punished for that. I think that the prosecution's focus on what is actually at stake here, we're living in a community that is polarized. We're living in a country that is polarized. And I, too, will join in and say I don't envy you having to sentence someone with the climate that we have. Now, I did not object to people coming in here wearing posters encouraging you to punish Mr. Melendez. I did not object to people coming in and writing letters for Mr. Dent. I'll take it either way. Either he wrote the letter and he's far more eloquent than he pretends to be, or somebody else did it, which is, either way, he has been, in this case, with a very highly publicized dismissal by the prosecution prior to a jury making a determination as to whether or not he was innocent or guilty of possessing those drugs. He's been propped up by the prosecution to testify against Mr. Melendez, and in the prosecution's own closing argument, they bring up a totally inadmissible fact, and that is that they voluntarily dismissed the case against him, vouching for him and vouching for what it is that he said and he did. Now, I say this. I don't think that you should look at this case with blinders on. On the other hand, messages to the community, this is an individual. He put on a uniform every day, went out into the public, not knowing what was going to happen. And you see attached to the sentencing memorandum not only letters from friends, but commendations that show this is a man who's been under fire, stood in front of people who were being shot at and protected them. This is a man who ran into burning buildings and brought elderly people out when others wouldn't without equipment on. This was an officer of the year in the city of Detroit. You want me to?
One second. It's some noise on over here. Tell me before I'm the record. Go ahead. I'm sorry, sir.
With over 40 citations and commendations, medals, awards, accolades, the respect of his peers. Now, what happens in a case like this? In an incident where split-moment decisions are made, he gets to be judged by his jury, and the jury spoke, and they said what they said. I don't have to agree with it, but they said what they said. All right? The point is that you're talking about a brief moment of time, and I disagree with Mr. Donaldson on this. There is ample evidence that the white Cadillac passed from left to right, and that they moved their position of their car. There's ample evidence that they were in a position to see. And despite the attack on Mr. Zielinski because he's a racist, there's nothing about Mr. Melendez being a racist. And Zielinski said that he had the ability to observe, which was consistent with his report. And if you take a look at Mr. Melendez's own report, it chronicles step by step what it is that happened there. The jury said too much for the number of hits. We got to live with that. But they made no finding regarding the other issues that he's raised that he wants to lay at Mr. Melendez's feet. The planting of the cocaine, the fact that there was somehow some mistake made when he had a dirty urine. You know, this is a man who has a history of drug paraphernalia and use of drugs. And he was using that night. And to say otherwise would be reading into facts that the jury didn't find. Now, as a father, stepfather, a husband, his wife's here in court. You read the letters. You know that she has difficulty. As a police officer, this is a family that has struggled as a result of their devotion and their service to their city. She was thrown from a police car in a chase and has a head injury. And because of that, she has reasoning and judgment issues which you've seen, which she's apologized for, and she's here to say that.
I accept it, too. Thank you.
All right? She's come to depend on Bill. All right? I've been with him. I've struggled through this with him. I have to say that as a client, I couldn't have a better one. And it was my privilege to represent him. Now, you have a judgment that you have to make. And it looks like the guidelines are 29 to 57. And I don't know whether Mr. Donaldson is going to be persuasive, but you have the ability under Lockridge, and there's another case called Steinhaus, to if you consider a life of devotion to the city of Detroit, here's a kid who was born in Inkster, he was born in Detroit, raised in Inkster, went to schools in the area, is living now, in the Detroit area, and has contributed, not only by his service to this country, but he's gotten commendations.
I hate to interrupt you, but one of the things you did say was that he lived in Detroit. Was that something that you wanted to correct? Because according to the pre-census report, it was in a suburb outside of the city.
He does now.
Okay, so you need to have that done.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
He lives in a suburb.
He does not.
He lives in a suburb now. Now.
Okay.
I mean,
I understand that. Can attorneys approach?
yeah.
You said MDLC requires him to be a resident of Wayne County to do what you want to do. Do I not say that?
I mean, as a consideration, do you understand?
Yeah. The probation, he spoke about transferring his probation.
Probation.
Well, you're talking about...
Whatever. You need to go ahead. No, I'm sorry. Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
So I was talking about Lockridge and Stanhouse and the reasonableness of what it is that I'm going to ask you to do. He has been in the service. He's had foreign service. He's been in war zones. He has been a police officer, and you are very well aware of what Detroit police officers face every day. He was working at Inkster and Highland Park. He is a person who not only gave service to his community, but he also has contributed to his community, not just in money, in actions with respect to vets and children. This is important because when you're starting to talk about what the guidelines do not take into consideration, these are the things that the guidelines don't. And that would go into the factor of reasonableness for the departure that I'm asking you to do. You've heard the facts of the case. Obviously, you're very aware of what the recommendations were in the probation report. I don't believe that incarceration in a state institution is warranted. There's many reasons why. And I'm certain that the court is aware of those. He has been now in custody since you remanded him. What is the deterrent factor that served here to him? There is none. Mr. Donaldson has indicated that he'll never do that again. He's not going to be a police officer. He's lost a job. All the attendant income and the things that go along with it are gone. His private security firm is now, except for one client, out of business, and that'll be gone soon. What else can we take from him? Now we're talking about restitution. You want $1 million from him as well? All right. Where is the retribution necessary in order to deter the conduct? There isn't. Now, you send this message out to the community. You want to send the message out to police officers. This case has been broadcast on the media. It's been in the newspapers. Mr. Dent himself has been on TV several times. Everybody's got the message. And when the conviction came through, everybody got the message as well. What more do you have to do? You remanded him at the time that he was, the jury came back. And he's now been in the Wayne County Jail ever since then. You can depart to probation. You can depart to credit for time served. And there's no need to send this man to prison, where he's going to have to face one of two things. Either the potential that some guys are going to come up and do something to him because they want to. Or they put him in solitary confinement so that they protect him. 24 years of service. All down the drain. And now, what is his government doing to him? For a lapse in judgment, for a brief moment in time, that the jury got to sit in an armchair and second guess. You have the power to do it. You have the strength to do it, but I don't know if you have the will, and so I'll sit down.
Does your client want to address the court?
Yes, sir.
Would you please stand up, Mr. Melendez? Wait a minute, let them down. Just hold on before you drop the camera.
Judge, would you like me to sit?
Yeah.
You know, I forgot to tell you about that one letter from his neighbor. I know you read them all, but that one knocked me out. That's the kind of man going away, is it?
Mr. Melendez.
Your Honor and members of this court, I have spent the majority of my life in service. Service to my country as an honorably discharged veteran of the U.S. Army. Service to my community as a police officer in the cities of Detroit, Inkster, and Highland Park. Like many who proactively patrol the streets in cities with high crime, violence, low income, and poverty, emotionally it becomes a part of you. I have witnessed such senseless acts of violence from people towards each other and their family, and in many cases children. For most of us, the more we witness and investigate, the more it takes from us. It takes a little piece of you every day when you go to work until there is nothing left. And you have nothing more to give. When there is nothing left, some officers shut down and they stop working. Others leave to quieter cities where the pay is better. Some retire early. Others quit to pursue other careers. There are a few. There are a few brave. They are out there right now on patrol. They are even here in this courtroom. They have the perseverance to put a uniform on and to go out onto the streets and do the job. They don't do it for power or authority. They do it for hope. Hope that just might, in their selfless actions, might make one small city block a little safer. Save a life. Or help someone make the right decision towards their future. To Mr. Dent and his family, I am truly sorry if this has caused undue hardships in your personal life. And if you have any animosity towards law enforcement, that was not my intention. To the community, I am truly sorry that you believe my actions were unjust. Please have faith in your law enforcement officers. For many of them would risk their life for yours. To my family, I am sorry, especially to my beautiful wife and my son, for they have suffered emotionally, physically, and mentally during these long, hard months. You said to me that we must move forward and put this behind us. I wish to move forward with my family, especially my wife, who is a disabled Detroit police officer. In the performance of her duty as a police officer, while in pursuit of armed suspects, wanted for multiple armed robberies, in the 9th Precinct, she suffered a severe and traumatic head injury. Her injuries were life-altering and permanent. She was told she would never be a police officer again and move forward. And she did. And I'm very proud of her for that. I wish to continue my support in the community for the foundation, the organizations that I have started many years ago. The support of families of those officers that have fallen in the line of duty, to the Wounded and Disabled Veterans Association, and to the Tyler Diaz Foundation, which encourages research, education, and awareness for children who suffer from extreme autism. Your Honor, I would like to conclude this with a poem. It's a poem that is familiar with us in law enforcement. It's not familiar in the public. It's a poem that I have read numerous times at funerals for officers that fell in the line of duty. Several of my friends. One young officer I trained. It is called The Final Inspection. It is written by an unknown author. The policeman stood and faced his God, which must always come to pass. He hoped his shoes were shining just as brightly as his brass. Step forward now, policeman. How shall I deal with you? Have you always turned the other cheek? To my church have you been true? The policeman squared his shoulders and said, no, Lord, I guess I ain't. Because those of us that carry badges can't always be a saint. I had to work most Sundays, and at times my talk was tough. And sometimes I have been violent because the streets are awfully rough. But I never took a penny that wasn't mine to keep. Though I worked a lot of overtime when the bills got steep. I never passed a cry for help, though at times I shook with fear. And sometimes, God forgive me, I wept unmanly tears. I know I don't deserve a place among the people here. They never wanted me around, except to calm their fears. If you have a place for me here, Lord, it needn't be so grand. I never expected to have too much, but if you don't, I understand. There was silence all around the throne, where the saints have often trod. As a policeman waited quietly for the judgment of his God. Step forward now, policeman. You won your burdens well. Come walk a beat on my heaven's streets. You've done your time in hell. Your Honor, thank you. I submit to your judgment.
Thank you so much. Judges, by definition, are impartial decision makers in the pursuit of justice. They are to examine both sides and fashion punishment that is proportionate to what is morally acceptable to all the parties involved, the victim, the public, and the defendant. I'm going to start out with Mr. Dent. The victim involved in this tragedy is a 58-year-old black man who was driving his Cadillac in Inkster, a suburb of Detroit. On the evening of January 28, 2015, where his life changed forever. He was stopped by the defendant, a then Inkster police officer, and his partner, Officer Zelenowski. Mr. Dent was stopped for a minor traffic offense and ordered out of his vehicle. With his hands extended out of his driver's window, he was grabbed out, thrown to the ground, and struck 16 times in the head by the defendant. In his attempt to arrest him, he was thrown onto a window shield of a patrol car, bleeding profusely from a head injury. The responding police officers arrived as the defendant is wrestling the defendant to the ground. Mr. Dent was struck, kicked, and tased while on the ground by what appeared to be a group of angry, anxious police officers that celebrated after the defendant was beaten and cuffed. The video in the car shows the police officers fist bumping as a celebratory act of bravery by the defendant and his cohorts. But the one image that struck out to the court was looking at Mr. Dent in his cell, shaking his head. In disbelief of what had occurred to him. If his conduct was indicative of what he was thinking, I would have thought this: what crime did I commit? Being a black man in a Cadillac, stopped for a minor traffic offense by a group of racist police officers looking to do a nigger. As Police Officer John Zelenowski, auxiliary police officer, testified in court too, in his response to a text, was quoted as saying, "At least give me the satisfaction of knowing that you're out there beating up niggas right now. LOL." How humiliating and degrading that must have been. He was left in a cell for a number of hours before getting medical treatment. But after hearing the defendant and his fellow officers joke about his injuries as they were wiping blood off their uniforms with disinfectant. 2015. Please be quiet in my courtroom. How does this happen? I'm going to tell you how it happened. Some years ago, 19 to be, well, 25 to be exact, I remember coming into this building with such enthusiasm, so excited. And I remember a lawyer telling me that nobody leaves out of this building like they came in. I didn't understand what that meant. 20 years later, I do. Everybody has a grand idea about changing the world. And you seem like you felt like you're fighting a losing battle. And little by little, it grows. It's a cancer. It starts to eat away at you. You become cynical. You start to look at pictures of homicides, not for the goriness, but as evidentiary value to see was the shooter left-handed or right-handed. It eats away at you. You go to social events, you tell people what you do for a living, and after they say, what kind of cases do you hear? And as a judge, prosecution, defense, does criminal defense, a police officer, after a while they say, we don't want to know anymore. That's the job in the criminal justice system. It's compounded with that being a police officer. There's a culture among police officers. And that culture is a norm of understanding all police officers within a department adhere to. Particular norms, values, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. They come in three forms. The blue wall of silence. Protecting police officers at all costs because supervisors and citizens are distrustful, evil, and untrustworthy. Us versus them. The good police versus the others. Citizens and offenders, they're all grouped together. They're one and the same. Cover-up mentality, which discourages officers from trusting supervisors and citizens because the police officers believe that the public didn't understand them. They don't understand true police work. And they are forced to face criticism from others about their job, from the media, from their families and friends. These pressures and expectations force officers who have a pure desire to purely serve the community as an occupation to conform to this group mentally or face being ostracized and labeled as an outcast among that group. These methods of indoctrination are passed along to new police recruits in the academy by stressing the importance of obedience to authority through a structure of shame and honor. It teaches them to conform and obey to the prevailing standards of the police culture. Field training, the recruit gets a reality check of what it's like to be out in the city. They then begin to shy away from what they've learned in the academy, and automatically they become a prototype of really who trains them. It's horrible, and it's worse than when cities that lack resources to properly train its new and existing officers with methods to combat this culture and adopt new ways to handle the stress of the job. One of the things the prosecutor says is that we want to deter others, police officers, from behavior like this. Being a police officer in a major city with very little funding is damned if you do and damned if you don't. 6 months police academy for most cities, long hours, horrible pay. I was out at a mall yesterday. I asked a woman a question. I said, you don't have to answer. How much do you get paid an hour? She said, $15 with benefits. Well, guess what? That's more than what Inkster gets. They don't get benefits. The equipment, the police cars are old. We went out to the scene. Early in the morning, there were people who were using drugs. They just kind of came out. And the only thing I could imagine was the only thing that is separating these people from drug selling are the police officers that appeared in my court. Many of the cars, the tires are almost bald. No support services for stress. No mandatory counseling for police officer. We rather put money in technology by buying bait cars and surveillance cameras. But that doesn't reduce crime. It doesn't deter it. Properly trained police officers do. According to Law Enforcement Today, a publication, police officers have the highest rate of alcoholism, divorce, drug abuse, suicide. Their life expectancy is 10 years less than the average American. Police are human beings too. They feel despair and they have ups and downs. Their job is made worse because they see on a daily basis, more than any other occupation, the worst behavior that people can inflict on one another. They go to work every day with the knowledge that some of the people that they are sworn to protect and serve want to kill them. The media and their bosses scrutinize their every move, and they get paid worse than security guards at malls, whose the worst crime that can be committed is shoplifting. Many times people say, well, you know, if you can't handle the stress of the job, then you need to take these officers off the street. But how do we as a community expect superior services from police officers who are making security guard salaries to receiving little compensation and struggling just to pay health care? Well, many have said when they accepted the job, they accepted everything that came along with it, and they could handle it or leave. In the great words of a man that I truly respect and honor, slaves had jobs too. Our society is reactionary, not preventative. We would rather save a few dollars to balance a budget than pay millions of dollars to reverse a tragedy that we could have prevented. I know that Mr. Dent would give back every dime of his $1 million settlement to go back to where he was in his life before January 28th. I wonder what would one half of that $1.4 million settlement awarded to Mr. Dent have done for the Inkster Police Department? Training officers that wanted to serve and not hiring officers that didn't belong. It's my belief that when we begin to value and properly compensate and train those that want to serve, then and only then will we as a community receive the type of services that we expect and demand from the defenders of our community, the police. It's amazing how poor cities like Flint can find millions of dollars to attempt to reverse a situation that $100 a day could and would have prevented. The legislators said we didn't know about Flint or we didn't intervene sooner. The government's responsibility is not solely to save money, but is to protect its citizenry by paying and training police officers better. My belief is simple. If we don't invest in our police officers, we're going to see more incidents like the one that I'm presiding over today. We'll pay now or we'll pay greater later. Mr. Melendez, the purpose of this long, protracted sentencing was to offer you the one thing that this court believed you didn't give Mr. Dent: fairness and due process. Being a police officer is a tremendous and very rewarding occupation. I believe it's a calling on your life to do justice in the community. On January 28, 2015, you did not fulfill your job. You performed Just Us, a game that began with a police stop. The purpose of it was to harass and degrade a motorist in Inkster. The man chosen for your game was Floyd Dent, a black man. The game went like this. Let's follow a car in a known drug area, and based on your years of training experience, you knew that the motorist would likely be a black person, no license, armed with a gun or drugs in a vehicle. Upon stopping Mr. Dent, you knew, and upon stopping Mr. Dent, who was dead wrong for driving with no license or license suspended, running stop signs, and weaving in and out of the back street, which the court saw on the video. You and your sidekick, auxiliary police officer Zeleniewski, caught your prey. Upon being stopped, Mr. Dent put his hands out of the driver's window in plain view. Your partner and you pulled him out. When he didn't move fast enough for you, you refer to it as resisting. I call it bowing down to your command. You utilized your dirty, hairy tactics and used excessive force to arrest him. Your job was twofold: investigate the situation, be a positive example to Officer Zeleniewski. When your posse arrived, they joined you in the takedown, kicking and tasing and ultimately throwing Mr. Dent into a windshield of a police car with a dash cam, which I refer to as the eye of justice. You were so into your bravado that you forgot the eye of justice was watching you and recording this disgusting beating, seeing Mr. Dent slammed into the window shield with blood running down his face. The dash cam that was designed to protect you ended up being what convicted you. Fist busting after taking him down as a sign of bravery was just another cowardly act caught by the eye of justice. You knew better. You were better trained than any of those officers out there. You were more experienced. Took me several days to read the letters that people sent talking about your character, about the man that you are, about how you went in Westland and helped to save 3 senior citizens from a burning building. 3 of those letters, I believe, were from African Americans, and one even professed to be like a mother. One or two things: either they're all racist or there's something redeeming about you that somehow in some way you forgot that night. The way you denigrated that man was awful. Who would know and who would care about a lone black man being assaulted by upstanding police officers? Boy, were you wrong. They say that what you do in the dark will eventually come to light. And yes, it did. It became a worldwide example of what the police is not about, and that's brutality. At the station, the other eye of justice captured you and your posse making fun of Mr. Dent, mimicking him struggling while you all wiped the blood off your uniforms with disinfectant while he watched. Such an awesome, caring, properly trained police officer you led your fellow officers down a path of cowardly behavior. But today you will pay for it. You will pay for two things: not being an example of greatness, which I know that you are from all the letters of support, awards, and commendation that you have shared with this court, and resorting to cowardly acts of barbaric behavior that led you to be convicted of these crimes. There's an old saying, it ain't no fun when a rabbit's got the gun. It's equally applicable when he has the video. The eye of justice in this case. You betrayed your city. You caused your lovely wife heartache. And you caused Mr. Dent severe anguish. And finally, in the words of Vicki Yost, your commander, accountability is required to ensure continued community trust and healing. Today, I can only punish your conduct, but only you and God can change your character. I've had an opportunity to listen to both sides. And I had to say this because I didn't say this during the trial. But it was my privilege to be able to oversee this trial because I had great lawyers. And great lawyers make jobs real easy. At this time, I am going to commit you to the Michigan Department of Corrections. However, after weighing the allegations in this particular matter and looking at all the circumstances, including what you've done and who the person I really believe that you are, I'm going to commit you to the Michigan Department of Corrections as to count 1 for no less than 13 months, no more than 10 years. As to count 2, I'm going to give you 90 days credit for time served and close it out. The court's going to give you 85 days for credit. You have 42 days to appeal my decision. That concludes this matter. Thank you. So it has to be 85 days. Right. The amended one, then that one is
That's
I'll be around.
Now, you know what, Doctor, what you gonna have to do?
Can I give up one?
Would you just listen sometime?
And I didn't go too long on this, but I just wanted to show you my Nice seeing you, Judge.
Now, one of the songs that comes way down the town was
Well, I didn't want to go too